The room is quiet, save for the hum of the overhead projector. You are sitting at the edge of your seat. On the whiteboard behind your manager, a single question is written in blue dry erase ink. What is our strategy for the Q3 delay? You know the answer. In fact, you've spent the last 3 days analyzing the data, mapping out the supply chain bottlenecks, and drafting a 3-part solution. You are, by all accounts, the most qualified person in this room to speak on the matter. But as your manager turns around and looks directly at you, your heart rate shifts. "Sarah," he says, "what's your take on this?" Inside your head, a massive engine roars to life. It's a beautifully complex machine built from years of education, deep analytical thinking, and a genuine care for the project. In a fraction of a second, that engine generates a massive web of information: the historical context from 2 years ago, the nuances of the vendor's recent software update, the 3 edge cases that might happen if you choose option B, and the fear that if you don't mention the edge cases, someone will think you didn't consider them. You open your mouth to speak. Your goal is simple. You want to be understood. You want to show them the full picture. "Well," you begin, "it actually started back in February when the vendor changed their API protocol, which didn't directly cause the delay, but it created this cascade effect with the inventory logging system, and if we don't fix that first, then whatever we do with the shipping routes won't matter, though the shipping routes are also a problem because of the fuel surcharges, which, as you know, went up last Tuesday." You are 3 minutes into your answer. You haven't paused for air. You can feel yourself drifting away from the shore of your main point out into a vast ocean of details. You know you're doing it. You can see it in the room. Your manager has leaned back in his chair. His pen, which was poised to take notes, is now resting on the pad. The colleague to your left is staring at her laptop, her fingers tapping gently on the trackpad. They aren't angry, they aren't judging you, they are just lost. Here is the deep irony of communication. Highly intelligent people are often the worst at it, not because they lack vocabulary and not because they lack confidence. It is because they possess a high capacity for nuance. When you see a problem, you don't just see a broken pipe. You see the water pressure, the age of the metal, the chemistry of the corrosion, and the blueprint of the entire building. To you, leaving out any of these details feels incomplete. It feels like a half-truth. So you over-explain. You pack every sentence with parentheses, caveats, and footnotes. You think you're building a bridge of logic for the listener, but to the listener, you aren't building a bridge. You're dumping a pile of bricks on their lap and asking them to build it themselves. There's an invisible tax on over-explaining. It doesn't destroy your reputation overnight, but it slowly erodes your authority in small, quiet increments. When you spend 5 minutes explaining something that requires 30 seconds, the listener subconsciously makes 2 assumptions. First, they assume you lack clarity. They wonder if you actually know the core answer or if you're sorting through your own thoughts in real time. Second, they assume you're defensive. Over-explaining often sounds like an unprompted justification, as if you're anticipating an accusation that hasn't been made. To fix this, we have to change how we view the act of speaking. Right now, you might view speaking as an act of transmission. Your job is to download everything in your brain into their brain. But powerful communication is actually an act of curation. Your value as an expert is not your ability to remember every detail. Your value is your ability to filter out 90% of the noise, so the other person only has to process the 10% that matters. Silence is not a void you need to fill. It is the framework that holds your best ideas together. To change how you speak in high-pressure moments, you don't need a complicated communication framework. You need a simple physical rule you can visualize while you're talking. It's called the traffic light method. Imagine that every time you open your mouth to answer a question, an invisible traffic light turns on. For the first 30 seconds, the light is green. Your talk time is clean, direct, and highly relevant. You're stating your main point, giving the direct answer, and providing the immediate context. During these 30 seconds, the listener is fully engaged. Their attention is at its peak. At the 30-second mark, the light turns yellow. This is the zone of nuance. You're adding the necessary supporting details or explaining the why behind your answer. The listener is still with you, but their cognitive load is increasing. The danger zone is approaching. This is where you need to start looking for an exit. At the 60-second mark, the light turns red. The light is solid, bright red. Your time is up. If you continue speaking past this point without pausing, you are no longer answering a question. You're rambling. You're processing your thoughts out loud, and you're beginning to lose the room. The hardest part of the traffic light method isn't the first 30 seconds. It's knowing how to stop when the light turns red, even if you feel like you haven't said everything. Intelligent communicators use a technique called the landing strip. When you see the red light coming, you don't just stop mid-sentence. You land the plane safely by tossing the ball back to the listener. Let's look at how Sarah could have handled the Q3 delay question using this method. The Q3 delay is primarily driven by a vendor API update that disrupted our inventory logging. To fix it, we have a two-part strategy. First, we're rolling back the software version by Friday, and second, we're rerouting the critical shipments through our secondary carrier to avoid the backlog. Sarah looks at her manager. That will stabilize our timeline by next week. I have the detailed data on the fuel surcharges and edge cases if you'd like to dive into those, but that's the high-level view. Where would you like to start? Notice what happened here. Sarah didn't hide her knowledge. She didn't pretend the problem was simple. She simply packaged the core truth, delivered it, and offered the rest as an option. She demonstrated absolute control, not just over the project, but over herself. When you begin to practice this, something unusual happens in your meetings. People start listening differently. Because they know you don't waste words, they lean in closer when you do speak. They don't check their phones. They don't interrupt you to speed you up, because they know a pause is coming. You are no longer the person who over-explains. You're the person who clarifies. You realize that you don't need to speak more to prove how much you know. Your brevity is the proof of your mastery. True confidence in communication is not about having the perfect words for every second. It is about being comfortable with the silence between them. Think back to your last few meetings. Where do you find yourself over-explaining the most? Is it when you're giving status updates, when you're defending a decision, or when someone asks you a question you didn't prepare for? Let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about it.